going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. On this episode, I'm going to be breaking down college football's biggest Week 12 matchups. We're going to be talking Utah, Arizona, Georgia, Tennessee, UNC versus Clemson, and a couple of other games as well. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. Every episode of the podcast is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed this episode, we will greatly appreciate it if you give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. It helps us out a lot. And also, share this episode with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Utah versus Arizona is a really underrated game that I don't think enough people are talking about. Arizona, they're a 1-point favorite. This pretty much is a pick'em, and they're one of the hottest teams in college football right now. They got a win over Colorado on the road, which was a really close and tightly contested game. They smashed UCLA. They beat Oregon State by 3 at home. Utah, on the other hand, they're coming off a close loss to Washington, and that game was a lot closer than what people expected. Bryson Barnes, he showed the ability to be a solid quarterback as long as he's able to take care of the football. And he's going up against an Arizona defense that's a couple notches better than the defense that the Utes faced last week in the Washington Huskies. Arizona, their defense has a pretty solid pass rush. They're really good in the red zone, and they're 14th in college football in rushing yards per game allowed, which is really big because the identity of Utah's team is their run game. They're a run-first operation. And when you think about the style of football that Utah plays under Kyle Whittingham, they're physical. They want to beat you up front. They want to impose their will on you. And if Arizona can take away the run game and make Utah one-dimensional and make this a game where Bryson Barnes has to beat them through the air, you like your chances if you're a Wildcat fan. But their defense, though, when you look at their pass defense, their secondary, I don't think it's all that great. And Colorado definitely was able to have success against this Arizona secondary. And that was probably one of the better offensive performances that we've seen out of the Buffs in the past month or so. So if you look at the performance that Bryson Barnes had against USC and even Washington last week, you feel really confident about his ability to lead Utah in the win in this game as long as you can play complementary football. If this becomes a game where Utah has to throw it to win and they can't get no help from the run game, they're going to be in trouble. They do have a really good offensive line, and defensively, in my opinion, they still have the best defense in the Pac-12. Now, you can say, well, JT, their defense gave up a lot of points against Washington. They got blown out by Oregon, and they gave up a lot against USC. I understand that. But you also got to take into account that Utah was going up against some of the best quarterbacks in the sport, and plus their offense wasn't really giving them a lot of assistance against Oregon. And even last week against Washington, Bryson Barnes threw 2 back-breaking interceptions. If Bryson Barnes can take care of the football and this defense doesn't have to be put in bad situations, there's a good chance that Utah can win this game. Yes, they're going on the road against a red-hot Arizona team. And Arizona, they're a really scary team. Offensively, they can beat you in a variety of different ways. They got 2 monsters at running back. Both of their running backs, Jonah Coleman and DJ Williams, are both 225 pounds. They're like Hess trucks. You give these fools the ball and they're looking to cause some damn violence. Shit, Jonah Coleman last week was a one-man wrecking machine against Colorado. This dude was averaging 16.5 yards per carry every time he tote the rock. And DJ Williams, like I mentioned earlier, he's a monster in his own right. Utah, though, they're really good against the run. They got one of the best run defenses in all of America. But even if you're able to slow down the rushing attack of Arizona, They can beat you throwing the football. They are deep at wide receiver. They're really talented at that position. And they got a really good quarterback in Noah Fafita that's really starting to emerge as one of the best up-and-coming quarterbacks in college football. So this is an Arizona offense that's really nice. They can beat you in a variety of different ways. Their offensive line is pretty solid as well. Utah's going to have their work cut out for them. On paper, Arizona looks like the better team. But Utah is one of those teams that you can never count out, because in most games when they're going against top-tier competition, they never really are given the benefit of a doubt when it comes to their talent. And they're not really a team that I believe wins just purely based on talent. They've been dealing with injuries all season long. This is a team that wins off grit and really great coaching from Kyle Whittingham. And you're going to need that to be able to beat this Arizona team. But Arizona barely was able to beat Colorado last week. And this is a Colorado team that isn't playing good football. And you would have thought that Arizona would have looked a little bit more dominant with the way their pass rush has performed this season. But Shedeur Sanders had a good amount of time to make some big throws downfield against this defense. If Bryson Barnes can take care of the football and he doesn't have any costly mistakes, I like Utah to win this game, and I'm going to take the Utes to win this game. This is one of those games where I think Kyle Whittingham and his ability to have this team ready to play and play up for competition in big games that they're evenly matched in is going to show. Arizona, they're red hot right now. They're one of the hottest teams in college football, but I think that their win streak ends here. Kyle Whittingham, I think they're being a little bit slept on in this game just because Arizona, their offense has way more to work with than what they have to work with. But against Washington and USC, they've shown the ability to be formidable throwing the football. And I don't think they need a big day on the ground to win this game. I don't think they need to go for 200 plus. I think all Utah needs to do is be able to play complimentary football, and they can win this game. Arizona, like they showed last week, that against Colorado, they weren't as good as the teams that they previously beat before that. This is the Arizona team that beat UCLA and Oregon State. And they're a really good team at home. Hell, they gave Washington a scare. But I don't think that they're going to keep winning against this tough, physical Utah team. And if you're an Arizona fan, you can say, well, JT, we beat Oregon State. They're a physical football team. Yes, they are. But I don't think your defense is good enough to completely neutralize this Utah offense. And I do think that Bryson Barnes, the pig farmer, and these running backs can get some points up on the board for Utah. And I think that their defense is definitely going to be able to get a few stops or more on this Arizona Wildcats offense. I like Utah to win this game. 31-24 is my final score prediction for this match. Man, are you tired of looking at your stale, boring-ass room? You want to know a way you can spice your room up and turn that thing into an out-of-this-galaxy experience? Click the link in the description or pinned comment and grab you a Starry projector light. The Starry projector light comes with 10 changeable color options, a built-in Bluetooth speaker, 12 and 15 switchable constellations, planets, moons, and stars. Transform your room from a depressing wasteland into a vibrant starry wonderland. The Starry projector light makes for a great holiday gift for family, friends, and loved ones. Click the link in the description or pinned comment and get one today and transform your room into a breathtaking, starry wonderland. Georgia's going on the road to Rocky Top to take on the Tennessee Vols. They are a 10.5-point underdog after getting smacked by Missouri. Now, I had Missouri beating Tennessee, but I didn't know they were going to beat that absolute dog, you know what, out of the Vols. And that had to be one of the worst games that we've ever seen Tennessee play under Josh Heupel. How are they going to respond after having a demoralizing loss like that? Because Missouri really laid it on them. And it doesn't get any easier because you're going against a Georgia team that just beat the brakes off of Ole Miss and put 50 on those guys. And they also did a really good job against Ole Miss offense. And Ole Miss has one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. Tennessee, they got off their game against Missouri. When you think about Tennessee, You think about their ability to throw the football, spacing you out with their great wide receivers, and to beat Georgia, you need two things. You need wide receivers that are good enough to challenge Georgia's secondary and a quarterback that's good enough to make NFL caliber throws. Joe Milton needs to have the best game that he's ever had for the Tennessee Vols in this matchup if they want to be able to pull off this win. So you got the home field advantage. Cool, and you can say that Carson Beck has never been in this hostile of an environment if you're a Vols fan, but I don't really think it matters. Georgia, I was talking to a homie of mine earlier, and he asked me, JT, how good is Georgia? I still believe Georgia's the best team in college football, all right? And it doesn't really matter if Carson Beck hasn't been in a hostile road environment like Rocky Top. Okay, cool. At the end of the day, what does it matter if your defense can't find a way to slow down this Georgia offense? This Georgia offense is the deepest that it's been in the last couple of years. Their last couple of championship teams were pretty good, but they're stacked at receiver. Even when Brock Bowers was out, you still had Ladd McConkey, Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas. Their running backs are really good. They can beat you in a variety of different ways. Tennessee style of football has been being physical, being able to run the football down your throat. And when they're not able to do that, they get into trouble because their inability to generate the same amount of big plays that they were able to have in 2022 with Hendon Hooker. Georgia, if they shut down Tennessee's run game and you got to ask Joe Milton to win this game for you, he needs to come up big. And I'm a little bit disappointed in how Joe Milton has played this year. He hasn't played awful. He hasn't played bad. I think he's played good, but I just expected more. And if you're a Tennessee fan, be honest, like, even you probably expected a little bit more out of Joe Milton. I thought that he would have been a Heisman contender this year. He is way more talented than Hendon Hooker, has the strongest arm maybe in the history of football, and Tennessee has been utilizing him a lot on the run. And you see in the first half against Alabama, they looked really good offensively. You need that first half offense that you displayed against Bama when you went into halftime with a 27 lead to show up in this game against Georgia. Because if not, this game has a chance of getting really ugly in front of your hometown fans. And, having the home field advantage definitely should help out Tennessee and help them find a way to keep this game close. But you're still going to need Joe Milton to step up and make those big throws. These receivers are really good. You got my guy Squirrel White. I mean, there's so much talent in this wide receiver room for Tennessee that I think their receivers are good enough to get the job done as long as Joe Milton can hold up his end of the bargain. Can Tennessee play a complimentary game where they get the run game going against Georgia? I don't know. I mean, they didn't really have success running the football against Missouri. As a matter of fact, they got absolutely gashed on the ground against Missouri. They had only, 83 total yards of rushing compared to Missouri going for $250? And that doesn't even include their running back who they gave up 205 yards to. Tennessee, they got to get back to that physical brand of football that they were playing when they were playing their best football early during the middle portion of this season. This Tennessee team isn't built off airing the football out and being a finesse team. And you're not going to beat Georgia that way anyway. You got to be able to hold your own up front when you're going against this Georgia defense. I've said this plenty of times. I'm going to say it again. This Georgia defense isn't as good as the previous two defenses that they've had the last two seasons, because those defenses have been historically great. Now, Georgia's defense this year is still really good, but up front, Tennessee, you need to be able to have success controlling the trenches. If you can't control the trenches against Georgia, you already lost. You need to give Joe Milton time to throw the football downfield, and Joe Milton needs to make big plays for you in the passing game. And you're also going to need a little bit out of him in the ground department as well, because I don't really see Jabari Small and the other running backs that you have on your team having a lot of success on the ground. And Joe Milton has been asked to run the football a lot more lately over the last couple of weeks. This is going to be one of those performances that you just need an all-world performance out of Joe Milton to pull off this upset. Meanwhile, for Georgia, You're playing on the road. You can't get rattled. You got to make sure that you take care of the football and you don't allow Tennessee to push you around up front, which shouldn't happen. Even though Tennessee is pretty formidable, when you look at their offensive line and their defensive line, like, it may be a little bit surprising to say that Tennessee has been one of the most physical teams in the conference this year, because you don't really think about them having that style of football. But this isn't the same Tennessee team that we saw last year where they want to throw it all over the field against you. They got to be able to run the football and control the trenches up front, and they weren't able to do that against Missouri. They got to be able to do that if they want to have a shot at even keeping this game close, because I'm pretty sure the football team would hate to get embarrassed in front of their home crowd, but I think it's going to happen anyway. I think Georgia wins this game. I think maybe Tennessee could keep it close for maybe a quarter or two. Tennessee was able to get right against Alabama. They were up 20-7 at halftime. So, I mean, if you could play that same brand of football in the first half against Bama, why can't you do it against Georgia? Regardless of how Georgia fans feel about Alabama and how better they think they are, Alabama still is a really good team and they got a really great defense. Tennessee has shown the ability to have really good performances on offense. They just haven't been able to do it consistently for 4 quarters against great teams. And they got smacked by Missouri last week on the road. Them playing at home should energize them a little bit. Maybe they come out of the locker room a little bit amped up and wanting to give it to you because you're the number 1 team. And we remember how this game went last year. But I think this game is going to be really ugly for Tennessee. And if you're a Tennessee fan and you're going to this game, I'm going to ask you, how long are you going to stay around when this game does get ugly? Give me Georgia to win. 38-14 is my final score prediction for this matchup. I'm taking the Bulldogs to win outright, and I like them to cover. North Carolina is going on the road to take on Clemson. Clemson has been playing their best football over the last couple of weeks. They're on a 2-game win streak. They upset Notre Dame. They beat Georgia Tech pretty handily at home, and Clemson plays their best football when they're playing in front of their home crowd. Okay, yeah, they lost to FSU, but that was a very tightly contested game, and if it wasn't for that missed field goal that they had late, they probably win that game. Going against North Carolina, you got to watch out for 2 things: the run game and Drake Maye. They don't play defense. Their defense, we thought, started to turn the corner under defensive coordinator, Gene Chizik. But after their first 4 games of this season, this defense has completely went off the rails. Like, they've given up 30 plus or more in their last couple of games, outside of one, which was like a no-name team that they played. Clemson's offense, though, Cade Klubnik has not been good this year. I don't give a damn what the stats show. This dude has barely managed to complete over 50% of his passes in the majority of games that Clemson has played in. He struggled against Notre Dame, and you won that game. He struggled against NC State. His best game, he played last week against Georgia Tech. 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and completed 67% of his passes. UNC doesn't have a great defense. There's no reason why Cade Klubnik should struggle in this game. But against any team that's been formidable, he hasn't played great football. And when you're going up against Drake Maye, you got to be able to be on your A game. Now, we know that UNC had some really ugly losses, especially losing to Virginia. Don't know what the hell happened in that game. And Drake Maye does have a tendency to get a little bit careless with the football. He can get loosey-goosey at times, try to do a little bit too much. But one thing about Drake Maye is that you're not going to have too many performances where he just absolutely just implodes on himself. This is somebody who is going to give you consistent, high-level quarterback play every single game that he plays in. And Clemson's defense is not as good as what it used to be in previous years, but it's still a pretty solid group. But they're going to have their hands full trying to find out a way to slow down this North Carolina offense. And really, when you think about North Carolina, really, they're just offense or nothing. For them to win games, they have to outscore you. Clemson, you trust their defense to be able to get a couple of stops, but can you trust Cade Klubnik? You're going to have to rely on Will Shipley a lot in this game. All right, Will Shipley has to be the focal point for why you win this game. If you're North Carolina and I'm Mac Brown and I'm Gene Chizik, I'm loading the box and I'm doing everything that I can to keep Will Shipley and their other running backs from taking over this game because they're really deep at running back this year. They got another good running back behind Will Shipley. I can't pronounce his name right, so I'm not going to embarrass myself like that. If North Carolina forces Cade Klubnik to have to win this game, yeah, of course their defense is going to give up a couple of points and a couple of touchdowns because their defense just isn't good. I don't know what it is. Like, we talk about USC not being able to get it right on defense, but nobody talks about how North Carolina can never get it right on defense. But that's a discussion for another day. But if Cade Klubnik is forced to be in a position where he has to carry Clemson on his arm to win the game, they're in trouble. Yeah, he'll throw a couple of touchdowns, but he's also going to get a pigskin up a couple of times. And Drake Maye, you can't give him extra possessions. One thing that Clemson does have going for them that I really like a lot is the fact that they're one of the best teams in college football at forcing turnovers. And Drake Maye, he's going to give you a good amount of opportunities to come away with some takeaways because he's a really aggressive quarterback. He tends to throw caution to the wind a lot. He reminds me a lot of Josh Allen, but a lot smaller in size. And when you're playing against a quarterback that kind of takes a lot of risky throws or makes a lot of risky plays, you're going to have the opportunity to come away with turnovers. And I think that's going to be really big in a game like this where you may not get a lot of stops. I'm going with Clemson to win just because they're a more complete team. They've played their best football at home. They struggled on the road. But when they're playing at home, this is a completely different football team from what we've seen out of this team when they've had some questionable performances on the road. North Carolina, they're not a complete team. The only way they can win this game is by outscoring Clemson, and I trust Clemson's defense to get a couple of stops, regardless of how good of a quarterback Drake Maye is. Cade Klubnik, he may give North Carolina a couple of extra possessions because he just isn't that good. But I trust Clemson's defense to be able to find a way to slow down this UNC offense. And UNC's defense, I don't really think they're going to have an answer for anything that Clemson really throws at them offensively outside of Cade Klubnik turning the football over. Like, if Cade Klubnik plays this game the same way he did against Georgia Tech, Clemson should win this game by at least 2 scores. I don't think it'll be a blowout. Drake Maye is too good of a quarterback to allow that to happen. But I like Clemson to win at least by 10. Give me Clemson. 34-20 is going to be my final score prediction for this matchup. Kansas State versus Kansas. Kansas State is an 8-point favorite going on the road to take on the Jayhawks team that suffered a really disappointing loss to Texas Tech. That had to be one of the worst offensive performances that Kansas has had all season long. They only scored 13 points against Texas Tech. Kansas, normally when they're playing their best football, their offense is really explosive. They can generate a lot of big plays, whether that be in the passing game or on the run. Or on the ground game, And you got 2 really good running backs. You got Devin Neal, who's averaging over 6 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. You also got Daniel Henshaw, who's averaging 5 yards per carry. And the offense kind of runs through these 2 running backs. Jason Bean, he's pretty good, considering the fact that he was Kansas' backup quarterback. And he's a pretty solid quarterback. But he has a tendency to be really streaky at times. You also can't really trust his decision-making sometimes. Sometimes he'll throw a couple of passes that make you go, what the hell were you doing? And Kansas defensively, they can be inconsistent at times too. Statistically, when you look at this defense, you say this defense is dog shit. But at times, this defense can play good enough where they can bail this offense out at times. When you're going against Kansas State, however, though, you're going against a complete football team. This team that Kansas State has doesn't really have too many weaknesses. They're balanced offensively. Will Howard is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the sport right now. They got good running backs. They got one of the best offensive lines in college football. They can beat you on the ground. They can beat you on the air. And they also got a really good defense. The only knock on Kansas State's defense is that their secondary is a little inconsistent and they don't have a consistent good pass rush. And that could hurt them against Kansas. You see, to beat Kansas, you got to neutralize them from getting a lot of big plays downfield. Something that they got a really good chance of being able to produce against Kansas State with the fact that Kansas State doesn't have a great pass rush. And Kansas State's pass rush could kind of cost them a game like this against a Kansas team that is pretty balanced offensively when Jason Bean is playing good football. You see, if you can slow down the run game and make this a game where Jason Bean has to make plays with his arm, you like your chances of being able to generate extra possessions. And sometimes in certain situations, Kansas coaching staff is really good, but sometimes they can kind of try to do a little bit too much. They try to outthink the room at times. I think that Kansas State has the advantage when it comes to their coaching staff and their defense. Offensively, both of these two teams are pretty evenly matched. Kansas State, they can beat you in a variety of ways, the same way Kansas can. They got two really good wide receivers, and their offensive line is also pretty good as well. But whose defense is going to get more key stops in this game? Because that's really what it's going to come down to. Kansas State, they have kind of more of a bend but don't break defense. They're really good in the red zone. They don't give up a lot of points, and they're really good at getting you off the field in third down situations. Kansas, their situational defense, non-existent. They can't get you off the field in third down, and if you get in the red zone, more times than likely, 9 times out of 10, you're going to come away with a touchdown because they got probably the worst red zone offense or the worst red zone defense in all of college football. They're 132nd at red zone defense, and I think that pretty much means they're the worst defense in all of college football in the red area. I think there are, 132 FBS teams, and Kansas has the worst red zone defense out of all of them. I'm going to take Kansas State to win this game. Yeah, they're going on the road playing a good Kansas team that I think they have played some really good football at home, but they're just a more complete team than Kansas. They got a better defense. You can get off the field in third down situations. You can get stops in the red zone. I don't know how many stops Kansas defense is going to be able to pull off in this game. You kind of have to cross your fingers and pray to God that Kansas can find ways to get stops on defense. Now, their defense has the capability of being able to show up and get a couple of big stops in this game. But, you don't really know what you're going to get out of this defense on a week-to-week basis. This defense definitely is better than what they had last year. Their defense couldn't do anything right. But going against a Kansas State team that's starting to hit their stride, outside of that loss against Texas, which they probably could have won that game if they kind of had a little bit more of a pass rush and the ball would have bounced in their direction late in that game. But for the most part, Kansas State, I think with them having a better coaching staff, them having a more complete team than Kansas, offensively, both of these two teams are evenly matched. But defensively, Kansas State obviously has a huge advantage. And Jason Bean is just too inconsistent for me to trust him in a game like this. Although I do like Kansas running backs, I don't trust Jason Bean to be able to play good enough or consistently enough for 4 quarters for Kansas to pull off the win. Give me Kansas State with the win. I'm taking them to get the victory. 34-24 is my final score prediction for this matchup. Washington is traveling to Corvallis to take on Oregon State. There's a big sentiment going into this game that Oregon State is going to hand Washington their first loss of the season. Many people that I've talked to think it's going to happen, and Vegas thinks there's a very strong chance that it happens that well because they're a 2.5-point favorite. Now, why is Washington, a team that's undefeated, that's beaten the best teams in this conference, an underdog on the road against Oregon State? Well, it's the fact that you have to go on the road against Oregon State, and the majority of upsets that we've seen occur over the last couple of years in college football have happened when there's been a team that may be better on paper going on the road and losing. You see, Washington, they don't play their best football, in my opinion, on the road. I think they play their best football when they're playing at home. When you look at Oregon State, they got a really good defense. And also, they're really good at running the football. So it's pretty understandable why a lot of people are picking Oregon State to pull off this upset, because Washington, their defense isn't good. And they also aren't that great at being able to stop the run. Oregon State is the second most physical team in the Pac-12 behind Utah. And last week, Utah's offense played a lot better than what I expected. I didn't think that Utah's offense would be as efficient as what it was last weekend. They nearly won that game despite Bryson Barnes throwing 2 interceptions. If Utah can have success moving the football downfield against you, throwing the football, you feel really good about Oregon State's chances being able to have similar success with DJ Uiagalelei. But here's the problem with that. I don't think DJ Uiagalelei is that good. I think that his numbers are drastically inflated. Anytime I watch DJ Uiagalelei, I don't really see a quarterback that is all that great as people try to hype him up to be. His accuracy isn't good. He makes questionable decisions with the football, and he doesn't have good footwork inside the pocket. If Oregon State's going to pull off this upset, I think it's going to be because Damian Martinez, one of the more underrated backs in this sport, has a big-time performance. Last week against Stanford, he had 4 touchdowns, and he ran for 146 rushing yards. Washington, they got to be able to stop him in this game, because if not, Oregon State's going to be able to control time possession, keep your offense off the field, and if Oregon State's defense can get a couple of stops, which they definitely have the capability of being able to do so, this definitely can be an upset. Washington, though, outside of their close win against Arizona State, there hasn't really been a single team that's been able to slow down this offense. And Utah has the best defense in this conference, and they weren't even able to slow down Michael Penix and these wide receivers. You see, does Oregon State have the depth and talent in their secondary to be able to slow down these wide receivers that Washington has? Because they're 3-4 deep there. They also got a really good offensive line, and yeah, they aren't good running the football. I don't think it's because they can't run the football. It's just that they choose not to, because why do we need to run the football when we can just throw it all game against you with Michael Penix, who most people consider to be top 2 in the Heisman race right now? You see, for Washington, their defense really concerns me in this game, because even though DJ Uiagalelei isn't a good quarterback, he still has the ability to make a couple of big throws downfield. He does have a really good arm, and he is pretty athletic. And if Bryson Barnes was able to have success against this Washington defense, DJ Uiagalelei should be able to do the same. Washington is going to have to be able to make sure that they're completely flawless on offense in this game. This may be a game where your defense doesn't get any stops at all, with the way that Oregon State likes to run the football and how good their offensive line is. And they got a really good defensive line and a really good pass rush. And they're also really good at forcing takeaways. You know, there's an expression that goes, styles make fights. This is a really good game that we have 2 teams that have very differing styles. Washington is more finesse. They're going to air you out. They play more of a perimeter game. Meanwhile, you look at Oregon State, you know what they want to do. They want to run the football, and they want to prove that they're more physical than you. Whose style is going to prevail? Are you going to have that old school smash mouth style of Oregon State that comes on top? Or are you going to have that air raid, let's just say F it, throw caution to the wind, and we're just going to throw the football 40, 50 times, and you're going to have to stop Michael Penix. You're going to have to be able to get under, you're going to have to make sure that he's under constant pressure. You got to make sure that he doesn't have time to get these big throws downfield that he's been able to get with ease all season long. I like Washington. Oregon State, yeah, they probably could have a good amount of success running the football, but eventually DJ Uiagalelei is going to have to make some big throws, and I don't think he's capable of being able to get it done. Michael Penix, I trust him way more on the road than I do trusting DJ Uiagalelei at home. I don't care what the stats say. If you watch DJ Uiagalelei play, this dude is not that good of a quarterback. He's a okay quarterback. He's a good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. And going up against Michael Penix and this Washington Huskies offense, yeah, Oregon State has a really good defense. And you do like the fact that Oregon State is going up against a Washington Huskies defense that has played some really terrible football down the stretch. Washington is still capable of being able to get some stops, though. Anytime you're a run-heavy team and you're going up against a team like Washington, you really need to make sure that you can make the most out of every possession. Your defense is great, but Utah had a really good defense as well. Outside of Arizona State, there hasn't really been a team that Washington has played all season long that has displayed the ability to completely shut down this offense. Yeah, they're going on the road and they got to play against Oregon State and Corvallis against a sold-out crowd most likely. And it is going to be loud and it is going to have a big impact on the way that this game goes. But I just trust Washington. Listen, I know that you got to be a balanced football team, but even though Washington's defense is not good, I don't think it's completely dog shit. Hell, I think they can at least get a stop or two, and that's all that Washington needs is a stop or two. Because I don't really think that Oregon State's defense can hold these boys all game long. There hasn't been a single team outside of Arizona State that has displayed the ability to do so. What makes Oregon State any different? Okay, and you go back and you look at their game against Arizona. Arizona's offense had a good amount of success against this defense. Okay, it's not like Arizona wasn't able to do whatever they needed to do to be able to pull off that upset. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, he had 2 touchdowns in that game, but he got outplayed by Noah Fafita. Yeah, they were able to shut down the run game of Arizona, but Arizona was able to spread the ball out. They were able to have a lot of success getting big plays downfield and having success throwing the football. If Arizona can beat Oregon State, throwing the football, why can't Washington be able to do it when that's their style of football? Washington, they're not a team that's going to be able to impose their will up you with their physicality. They're a team that likes to win on the perimeter. And you look at Oregon State, yeah, they got a great defense, but they haven't shown the ability to shut down a truly elite offense. I haven't seen it all season. And this is one of those games where Oregon State and DJ Uiagalelei, they got to show me. DJ Uiagalelei, he has to prove to me that he can go toe-to-toe with Michael Penix. They can run the football all they want to. You're still going to have to ask DJ Uiagalelei to make some big throws to win this game. I like Washington with the victory. 34-27 is my final score prediction for this matchup. I'm taking the Huskies. I think they remain unbeaten on the season. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. It helps the channel out a lot. Remember that you can find every episode of the podcast available on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys shortly with another episode.